A woman with brown eyes sits at a chair looking at some papers. She asks if the girl says that she sent the application 2 weeks ago because she sent a request for, apparently, approval has not yet been received. The young lady now understands the situation, and the woman tells her that she will contact her as soon as the book is delivered. She asks if the girl lives in the village of Dienta, but the main character only looks at the woman and sees above her head that she will die on December 22nd, 482 due to illness. She looks at the young lady and asks if she has something on her head, and the main character says no. She also says that the woman can send a telegram, as always, and she will come again a little later. When the girl leaves the building, she thinks that someone would say that this is a real gift, but in fact, she does not even know whether such power can be considered a blessing. After all, when they meet, they always, out of habit, look at the predictions above the person's head instead of returning the greeting. The young lady thinks what will happen if she accidentally meets a person whose day of death is scheduled for tomorrow. Usually in such situations, you can pretend that she doesn't know anything. After all, she is just Ashana Az living in a small village. She has no special purpose or great mission, and she does not want to burden herself, so every time she returns home with the thought that she is selfish. The girl would like everything to be exactly like this. But then she runs up to that guy and tells him to be careful on the way home at night. The young man asks what she's talking about, and the main character says that it's so dark at night now that even the lanterns aren't on, so he needs to be careful because he could back down a little and die under the wheels of a passing cart. The girl claims that later, when this happens, she shouldn't say something like, "What a pity that I didn't listen to her." The girl says that, judging by his books, he is receiving a PhD degree, and does he imagine how annoying it would be to die without graduating from the university? Then the young lady leaves him. The guy shouts after her because he doesn't understand what the girl was talking about. The young lady only remembers how her mother addressed her and said that there is no division into good and evil or right and wrong, but there is only a choice to take the difficult path or the simple one, and only we ourselves make this choice. But the young lady does not understand at all why all the paths become difficult for her. Then the young lady returns home, where her mother meets her. She asks if the girl went to the library again. The main character says yes, but there is still no book she needs, and Fabiz is still a village. Only the name is a clue. Mom smiles and says that in fact, she hasn't been given city status yet, and then he points to the medicine and asks if Ash can take it to Grandma Carol after dinner. The young lady takes the medicine and asks if her grandmother is still sick, and her mother replies that she is already at an age when the recovery process is not the fastest. Then the girl asks if she can take them right now. Mom says that it would be great and that she better go before it gets dark. Then the young lady heads towards the exit and says she'll be quick. Ashana realizes that her grandmother will die in 3 months. She realizes that there is an evil fate that can be changed and gets off with a simple fright. But there is a fate that is destined to happen. A young lady approaches her grandmother's house. She comes in and is greeted with her. The old lady also greets her granddaughter and asks if she has had dinner and then offers her something to eat. The main character says that her mother is just preparing dinner and then hands her grandmother some medicine and asks her to take it. But when she looks at the date and cause of her grandmother's death, she sees that this date is written as if in red liquid. The young lady sighs and thinks that everything is as usual, because no matter how many times she has seen such predictions, they are all invariably red. Then, the young lady looks at the open window and asks if Grandma's window is open again. Ashana approaches the window. She claims that she asked her grandmother not to do this because she already had a cold. At this time, the young lady is immersed in her thoughts and thinks about why she has this power. She would like not to see such prophecies at all. Well, since nothing can be done about them, then so be it. After this, the young lady returns to her home at night. She realizes that she stayed longer than she expected. The girl thinks that this is not surprising, because once you start talking about her grandchildren, the conversation can last forever. When the young lady approaches the door, she thinks how cold it is. But when he sees prints of red liquid on the door in front of him, he is surprised. She immediately enters the room and thinks what happened there, because when she left, her mother's prediction was the same as before. But suddenly, when she turns around, she sees a young man lying in the bushes. Ishana thinks what kind of man this is. She sees terrible wounds all over his body and understands that he is barely breathing. The girl does not understand what is happening there and tries to touch the guy, but he immediately grabs her hand. The young man looks her straight in the eye and asks for help, but the main character only looks at his date and cause of death. The girl, using her ability, is shocked because the inscription above the guy's head is red, and it says that he will die at her hands in the year 427. The main character remembers how she woke up in that world as a baby. The girl was covered in bandages. And two parents looked at her. Mom asked if Ash had come, and Dad asked if something hurt. Ashana looked at them with her ability and saw their causes and dates of death. But she only had one single question, so she turned to the couple. Mom asked what was bothering the girl and suggested that she tell it like it is, but the young lady only asked who they were. The parents immediately began to hug their daughter. The main character couldn't remember anything at all, and it was these people who told her everything from beginning to end. The baby's name is Ashana As, and these people are her parents. One day, a girl was climbing the mountain to help them selling medicine, but suddenly she tripped and hit her head hard. To this day, her memory has not returned, even though they told her everything, and she more or less understood what was happening, but no one could explain why she sees these numbers above people's heads. The baby looked at different dates and causes of death. As the inhabitants of the village of Dienta died, she came to understand the essence of these inscriptions, although it took a long time. The young lady asked her mother if that man had died, and she claimed that he had fallen in broad daylight, but he was absolutely healthy. The guy was just walking home and perhaps slipped on the wet bank and fell into the river, and it seemed like he was swimming well. But it all turned out to be such a tragedy, but it's all heaven's will. The main character then turns to the woman, but she only asks what kind of child she is, and when she will finally start calling her mom. Ashana asks what year, month, and day it is, and her mother replies that it is the 12th of May, 410. Then the young lady remembers that same village resident who died from drowning, but he had an evil fate. Now the young lady understands that she sees a destiny outlined for a person, and she must not interfere. For some reason, this is exactly what Ashana thought, however. When she was sweeping in the yard, one of the villagers said that his friend almost got into trouble. And it's good that the cart broke down that day, because if he had left as planned, he would have been covered by an avalanche. The guy claims that fate itself saved him. The main character watches this with interest. She understands that even without her personal intervention, sometimes people's predictions change. She sees that the numbers have changed again, and this man was supposed to suffocate today. The girl thinks if this is fate, then shouldn't what is happening be definitely predetermined? And from that moment on, the young lady began to call it not the will of fate, but only a possible outcome. Then the young lady began to give advice to everyone. She told one of the villagers that it was better for him not to want to go to the lake today because it was too cold there for boat trips. And she told the second one that he should repair the cart because it is dangerous to ride with a loose one. She suggested to one lady that instead of climbing a mountain, it would be better to go to the lake because today was such a wonderful day for swimming. The villagers thanked the girl for saving their lives. Thanks to her, they survived, but they almost got into trouble. They all said that the girl was truly a child of good fortune. But the young lady didn't even know if it could be called that, because seeing someone else's death is clearly not luck. Now the young lady watches as her father treats the wounds of that same guy. She thinks that only once in her life has she seen a name cause death. A man from the village of Fabiz was killed by a guy living next door. Therefore, if a name is written in the reason column, it means that this particular person will become a threat to someone's life. But the young lady doesn't understand why it should be her. The father turns to his daughter and asks her to change the water. The main character agrees and gets to work. At this moment, she thinks that for some reason she is not sure that she will not kill anyone, because suddenly it will be death in order to save herself. But this even sounds strange. Ashana looks at the guy and thinks who he is. The father claims that there is no living space left on the young man's body. But this guy looks quite decent, so the father asks what happened if he is in such a state. Mom comes up to the main character and says that, by the way, the guy is so handsome and he seems to be from a noble family. Although the clothes are torn, the fabric is clearly of the highest quality. The father finishes treating the wounds. He heads to the door and says that the first aid has already been completed, so now all he can do is rest. Mom just tells her husband that it's a good job and then tells Ash that they'll be on their way. Then the young lady is left alone in the room. She sits on a chair and thinks about her mother's words that the guy is handsome. Looking at the young man, she thinks that he is really cute, but one might even think that this is a doll. The girl leans on her hand and also thinks that it just so happened that he should die in 5 years at the hand of Ashana Az, and why his fate is like this, and also why he came there and what the reason was. The young lady, thinking about this, falls asleep near the candle, but at the same moment, someone's shadow falls on her. It turns out to be the same guy with black hair. The main character continues to sleep peacefully. She had a dream about how she was wandering in impenetrable darkness, but then someone grabbed her hand. When the girl turned around, she saw a boy with black hair there. He was sincerely smiling at her. The young lady also smiled at him in response to this. She understands that it was the guy who brought her to the light. But suddenly, the realization comes to her that she has already seen this face somewhere. Then the young man lets go of her hand, and Ashana, in shock, thinks who he is. But suddenly the girl wakes up. She looks at the candle and thinks what a strange dream this is, but she is completely exhausted. But when the girl turns her head, a dagger is immediately put to her neck. This turns out to be the same young man with black hair. The brunette tells the young lady to answer why she saved him. The main character thinks that this is all, because in 5 years she will have to finish him off, but she definitely cannot answer that way. The guy asks if this is an order from the third prince. He asks where he is and who the girl is, and whether she decided to kidnap him and hold him hostage. He tells her to answer now, because if she doesn't answer, but the main character only hits him in the wound, causing the guy to cry out in pain. The young lady, looking at him, says that she has no idea what kind of third prince he is. And now he is in the village of Dienta. Besides, she saved him not to kidnap him or take him hostage, because the guy lost consciousness right in their yard. The guy is shocked by this, and the main character only points to her hand and claims that he himself grabbed her wrist and suddenly ordered her to be saved. And then she asks if he remembers anything at all. The girl thinks who this guy is anyway, and he doesn't look at all like a person who could imagine a knife to his throat. Ashana looks at the bandages in the red liquid. She gets up from the chair and says that they only stop the bleeding and asks why the guy is moving. The young lady then says that a new bandage needs to be applied, after which she takes out bandages from the first aid kit and turns to the guy, asking why he stood up and whether he should be treated while standing. After this, the young man sits on the bed and extends his hand. The main character just looks at him and he asks what she is looking at. The young lady thinks that first he put the knife with this hand, and now he held it out for her to heal. The girl understands that no matter how you look at him, he is very entertaining, after which the main character treats his wound. And then she says that it's too late, but her name is Ashana As. And in his thoughts, he adds that this is the reason for his death 5 years later. In the morning, the young lady wakes up from noise, and when she turns around, she sees a familiar face at the door. It turns out that this is the same brunette. He says that since she woke up, he can at least help. But the main character only barely gets out of bed and sighs displeasedly. The young man is shocked by this. He asks the girl what kind of breath that was just now, but Ashana just looks at him seriously. This makes the guy a little embarrassed, and the young lady at this time thinks that his face is certainly a work of art, but his expression is simply terrible. The young man is already asking how many times the question needs to be asked before she deigns to answer, but the main character only says that she noticed yesterday that he has no idea what a polite request is. The brunette only claims that he is not used to asking for something, and Ashana says that in his current state, this skill would not be superfluous. And after that, the girl asks what he even wants, because he himself can easily open the door and go look for help. The young man claims that this is too much for him, and the main character says how proud he is. The guy replies that pride is his main advantage, but the young lady just looks at him and thinks that this is only in words. She sighs and thinks that, apparently, she will finish him off, because she cannot stand this character anymore. After which, Ashana asks what is the problem. The brunette wants to say that he had a nightmare, but he breaks off mid-sentence and says that he was sleeping, and when he woke up, he started bleeding again early. He points to his wounds and says that since he has come there, let the girl go and get help. The young lady looks at the wounds and thinks that they look extremely serious, but it's amazing how the guy is still standing. Then the main character concludes that apparently he sleeps very restlessly, so he only tells the young man to sit down first. The young lady thinks that he looks very sick and is literally breaking out in a cold sweat, after which she sits behind him and begins to unwind his wounds from dirty bandages. But then the young man screams and asks if she's going to do it herself. Aisha's wife understands what's wrong and asks what's wrong with it. His Highness, all red, screams that she is a woman and he is a man. Well, the main character just calmly looks at him, and he says that to be precise, he is just a patient, and then asks Togo to be quiet. The girl thinks that considering the way he talks and how carefully he behaves, it seems as if he is on the run. So the main character wonders if she did the right thing by letting him home. She also thinks that she needs to ask the guy to leave as quickly as possible because she is afraid that waiting for him to fully recover will be too long. But if he somehow harms her family, the same brunette pulls the young lady out of her thoughts and asks whether she is doing all this well or is just admiring his body. But from these words, the main character immediately presses on his sore spot, causing the guy to cry out in pain. Ashana thinks to hell with the wounds, and maybe she should send him out right now. But the brunette only asks if she said yesterday that this village is called Dienta, and then says that he really got all the way there. Ashana looks at him and thinks that she doesn't need to know the circumstances of any uninvited guests, and she doesn't need to get close to them either. And even more so, this applies to a person whose death is caused by her. So the young lady just says she's finished. The brunette thanks her a little embarrassedly. The young lady is surprised because he even knows such words. After that, she puts back the medications and says that now she's going to go have breakfast at least, and asks the patient if he will join too. The young man asks why she calls him a patient. The main character just holds out her hand to him and says that she doesn't know his name, so how can I call him then? But the guy doesn't react to this and falls silent for a moment, and then says Fell. The young lady asks what this means, and the guy just says to call him Fell. The main character thinks about it. She thinks that the guy dressed like an aristocrat, looks the same, and yet his name is Fell. The girl understands that this is clearly an incomplete name and sounds more like some kind of affectionate nickname. So she looks at him and thinks she can ask, but she can't resist the guy's charm. So she sighs and says okay. And although she doesn't think she'll have a reason to call him by his name, she invites him to go. However, when they just open the door to leave the room, a sword is immediately pointed at them. The knight asks who the girl is. The main character is silent, but someone screams out her name. It turns out that it is the parents. They are sitting tied up on the floor, worrying about their daughter. Ashana realizes that she no longer likes this at all. The same one again asks who she is and screams for her to take her hands away from His Highness, because how could she even dare to touch him? The young lady says that since they are asking so, she will let him go and immediately throws off His Highness's hand. He immediately screams and says that he shouldn't have let go so abruptly, after which the young man looks angrily at his knights, and then hits the door with his hand and screams for them to put away their swords now, and then asks what kind of circus they staged there. The knights are a little shocked by this, but they immediately kneel down in obedience to His Highness. The guy looks at the main character, and the girl looks back at him, and thinks that the man she supposedly has to finish off is called His Highness. Ashana remembers who is being addressed this way in their empire nowadays, and yet there are only 3 young men with a similar title, and this is the legacy of the princes of Elior. It turns out that right in front of her now, all of them are wounded. Therefore, the girl understands that something happened in the capital. She remembers how the guy asked about the order of the 3rd prince, and it becomes clear to her that the culprit of what happened is the same 3rd prince. Then the young lady thinks who this guy is and whether he is the 1st or 2nd prince. But at this moment, the young man screams that this girl is only helping him, but those two. The main character compliments him and says that these are her parents, and it was they who nursed His Highness for several hours in a row yesterday. Then the guy turns to her in shock and then turns back to the knight with anger. He turns to Herodian and then screams that he did not even know all the circumstances of the situation and immediately declassified it. The young man also cries out that his chatty mouth will lead to no good, and then you ask what he is going to do when he is tracked down. His Highness is all on edge, and the main character sighs and says that she doesn't plan to tell anyone anything and finally suggests having breakfast. But then she thinks whether she really needs to feed the people who first invaded there without permission, and then also pointed swords at them. However, the girl understands that, knowing her mother's kind heart, she will not listen to her. Therefore, in the current situation, it is better to do what they ask and quickly get rid of the main culprit. The knights are having a meal at this time. When the main character enters the room, she says that when they eat, let them smear medicine on the wounds. After all, her parents personally prepared it, so it is very effective. The knights look at each other, after which one of them says that they are very grateful and did not even expect that they would be treated, after which they all cry out at once, asking for forgiveness. The young lady says that an apology is enough, and since they have settled everything, let them take these medicines. Then one of the knights accepts and tells them to at least let him wash the dishes, but the others also want to do something. Then the young lady agrees. She says that it is only after the treatment. She hands over clean rags and water to wipe the wounds. After that, they are all cured, and one of the knights approaches the main character. He says that he is very sorry that not so long ago he pointed a sword at her, but they rushed there in such a hurry to follow the tracks that they forgot about the need to reason sensibly. The main character says that there is no need to call her milady and let him better tell what traces he is talking about. Herodian says that he means handprints on the door, as well as in the courtyard. The main character completely forgot about it because she was still seriously scared. The knight says that she herself must have realized that that young gentleman is a prince. The young lady says that she didn't hear much, so there's no need to explain. The girl claims that, in general, yesterday she herself assumed that they were obviously treating some noble person, and when the knights entered there, she immediately understood everything. In addition, Ishana says that she will keep secret the fact that they were honored by her, albeit short-term, stay there, so they cannot bother themselves with explanations or requests to keep their mouths shut. Then the knight bows and says okay, and the main character says that she accepts his apology and that he must have been very worried. Fel approaches them. The band says that the knight directly strikes him, and the guy asks if he lost all his memory at breakfast. The prince asks whether the guy got too much for telling just anyone about him, and also asks if Togo is keeping his mouth shut. The knight only apologizes, and His Highness asks if he said it too softly. But the main character tells them to stop because she already knows everything, so now this story would not have much impact. Then His Highness tells his servant that he is free, and then the brunette stares at the main character. The girl asks if he wants to say something. The young man hesitates a little, and Ishana already anticipates difficulties. The young man doesn't even know how to say this. He claims that the girl has already done so much for him, but he hopes that she can help with something else. The main character only says that his skill in asking is growing right before his eyes, and asks whether he can see how he can improve in practice. But then she agrees and says that first she will listen to His Highness. After this, the prince says that he is now being hunted, so he needs to hide, and he cannot go to a safe shelter due to serious injuries, so he asks to stay there. When the brunette says that it is, the young lady thinks that she expected something like that anyway, and the guy only adds that she should not call him His Highness, unless the girl, of course, wants the whole village to know about him, and if she wants to address him, she can simply call him Fel. The girl says that she may not contact him at all, but the young man just looks at her a little coldly and says that one way or another now, she knows that they are trying to track down the crown prince of the empire. He says that he doesn't think the girl is interested in the details, so he's not going to tell anything. The brunette claims that although they are still looking for him, no matter what, he will return to the capital and take his rightful place. And then he will definitely repay the girl for her kindness, no matter how much time passes. At least a year, at least 5 years. He will definitely repay her, so the young lady should not worry. The brunette also adds that he is a man of his word. But the main character thinks that in 5 years he will no longer be able to repay her. The girl says that she more or less understands what he wants, but his recovery will take at least another 10 days. So she asks when exactly he plans to leave, and His Highness says that he thinks 1 week will be enough for him. The main character says that not everything is so simple, but Fel claims that a week is really enough. Then the young lady agrees and tells him to do as he pleases. On the same day, one of the knights is chopping wood. He asks Ishana if what he chopped is enough. The girl says that's fine and thanks the guy. And then he says that he really shouldn't have done this at all. But the knight only says that they provided them with food and shelter, so that's the least he can do for them. After which he asks if he can help with anything else. Then Ishana says that it will be wonderful if he takes care of these ladies who are also waiting to feed him. The guy is shocked by this, but the women with the food only say that even though the young man is so strong, he is a suitable groom for their daughter. The main character quickly leaves, and from behind, she hears the knight screaming that nothing else will fit into him. 2 days have passed since Fel and the squad of knights arrived in the village. When he first asked to stay there, he definitely meant that they would be quiet. The guy claimed that he would do his best so that the girl would not have any problems, and for him it would be a headache if everyone knew that he was being pursued. But although these guys sometimes seem stupid, they are smart enough to not attract attention, so the young lady should not worry. After all, they will be quieter than water and lower than the grass, and then they will leave just as quietly, as he said. But in reality, everything is a little different, because every morning the knights had a lively morning training session, and after them there were open baths in the yard, and they also endlessly interfered in matters that were not their own. The main character thinks whether this is called quieter than grass. The girl did not even notice how cramped this village was, and their recklessness was quite great. Suddenly, someone takes the firewood from the main character and asks if he can help her. It turns out to be one of the knights. The young lady thanks him. She understands that this is the leader of the knights, Herodian, and apparently he feels guilty for pointing the sword at her without thinking. That's why the guy constantly helps her. I can tell you that this is some kind of huge help, but it was he who brought positive colors to everything that happened. The young lady thinks that the village has not had such a lively atmosphere for a long time because people around are having fun, and the girl's parents can rest a little after the appearance of so many workers. The main character thinks that there's still something good in such situations, but suddenly someone in front screams. It turns out to be His Highness, and the main character thinks that everything would be fine if only this man were not there. The brunette at this time asks if she knows well the nature of the area you are in those mountains behind them. Ashana says that she often goes there to collect herbs, so you can say that. Then the young man says to take him there. The main character asks if he is going to the mountains in this state, but Fel only says that he needs to find something. Then the knight says that if he says that he will take the knights, and they will find it, but the prince refuses. He claims that he must do everything himself. Herodian is worried about his master, but cannot say anything. And the main character at this time agrees, but she claims that she has one condition. The girl points to the knight standing next to her and says that Sir Herodian will go with them. Then the girl asks if in a situation where he is being hunted, the guards will be superfluous. The prince doesn't know how to respond to this, so he simply turns around and says that she should do as she wants. The main character says that this is great and offers to leave immediately, and then tells the knight to just leave the firewood somewhere nearby. When they are already heading out, the young lady asks what exactly the prince is looking for. The guy replies that he is looking for a necklace with a silver medallion. Then Ashana thinks about it, and the prince says that if this finds him, he should never look inside. As they go deeper into the forest, the young lady asks if he is sure that he dropped it in these mountains. The prince says that it seems so to him. The young lady states that the word doesn't seem very encouraging, considering how high he has to go. The brunette says it doesn't matter how many hours it takes, but the young lady has no idea how many days it will take, let alone hours. She says that the prince must have been passing through the mountain range and asks if he has any idea where to look. The guy says he's not sure exactly, but he seems to have descended in a westerly direction from that white tree. The girl thinks that if he was trying to escape persecution, he could not go this way. Therefore, the main character says that she thinks it is better for them to take the steep road. The knight asks if the master is okay, and when they approach the slope. Then Ashana says that she thinks they have a better chance of finding him there, after which she turns to the guys. And he says that if they climb that hill, then they can consider that the most difficult part is behind them. The prince, barely breathing, answers yes. And then the knight offers to rest a little, but the prince screams that there is no need for this. The girl asks if the knight is also strained by these sighs, and says that one way or another, they still need to look from the opposite side, so she suggests first taking a breath. Then the knight offers to search around and let them rest for now. His Highness tries to argue something, but the main character tells him to do it, and then you say that the knight must have a very hard time because of some. After which he and the prince are left alone and sit under a tree to rest. The prince, when he looks at the young lady, thinks that she is an unusual girl because she does not try to pretend or suck up. Even we know that he is the crown prince. And on the contrary, he pretends that he has already got it. The guy thinks what kind of relationship this is. He asks if the young lady is even interested in him, and she promptly answers no. The young man did not expect such an answer. He asks if she is even interested in why he is looking for the necklace, and the main character only answers that she is now only interested in when they will find him and finally go down the mountain. The guy remembers the events of that morning and thinks that she even treated Herodino the way it seemed to him. The young man does not understand why the girl behaves this way towards him, so he says that the young lady is very strange indeed. Ashana does not understand what he is talking about, and the prince claims that usually other people are just eager to get to know him better. The main character says that if he hopes for a bright future, then he should keep his ego in check. Ashana thinks that she doesn't need to ask anything at all, because she already has some guesses. She remembers the prince's words that he must do everything himself. He also remembers how he himself went on a search in a state where it was difficult to even walk. Therefore, the girl concludes that this necklace is a very valuable thing, and he cannot trust it to anyone, even knights defending themselves. The young lady thinks maybe this is the life of the crown prince. But still she does not understand whether Sir Herdian does not deserve his trust. But suddenly, the girl sees something shiny in the bushes. She asks if the prince said that they are looking for a silver necklace with a medallion. Then the young man says that everything is exactly like that. And the main character asks if there are ornate patterns engraved on the surface and a small stone inserted in the center. The prince says that everything is exactly like that, and then realization comes to him and he cries out whether the girl found him. The young lady looks at the medallion in her hands and wonders if it was found so quickly. She can't even believe that she really found it, because the girl thought that it would be much more difficult, because people rarely go there, but it also lay in the thick grass. His Highness screams, but he cannot move due to such injuries. The main character turns to him and asks why he even dragged himself there if everything is so bad. His Highness only says that she talks too much and asks where the fat is. Then the young lady takes out the jewelry, but you see that it is covered a little with earth, so she decides to shake the dust off of it. But suddenly, due to such actions, the necklace opens and these two are shocked by this. The young lady at the same moment calmly closes it back and then hands it to Highness and says that she saw nothing. The same one asks what she said, and the young lady says that maybe just with one eye, but not directly in detail. The prince cries out whether she's thinking of making a joke, and the main character says that she's already forgotten everything because she forgets quickly. Then the guy snatches the necklace from her hand and tells her to quickly answer what she saw there. The main character says that she didn't see anything, and she's not lying, because she really didn't see anything, except bright white. The young man asks what else she saw. Besides the white color, and Ashana says that's all, she didn't look at anything else. The girl thinks that even though the prince treats it as if it were a very valuable thing, there wasn't even anyone's photograph inside. There was nothing inside the medallion, except the dazzling white surface is exactly the same as the view in her dream. The young man approaches her closely and calls her by her full name. The young lady is a little shocked by this, so she immediately pushes him back. The guy gets a little angry at this, and the young lady tells him to keep a safe distance. The young man says how strange the girl is, and then claims that in any case it is correct that she did not see anything. The main character asks what this means, and the guy continues and says that he himself doesn't see anything there, so he says that's how it should be. The young lady thinks whether she should have seen nothing, because if so, then he also sees nothing where there should clearly be something. The guy claims that this necklace contains a call to goodness, and after the ceremony of becoming emperor, he will be able to see what is inside. And now he's on the run just to protect him. The young lady says that she really couldn't even see anything, and the guy ties a necklace around his neck. And then she says that if she saw, then it would become a problem. Ashana Jat, you think that he still doesn't trust her. It seems that she is beginning to understand what is happening, and that the previously mentioned third prince must be pursuing him. But then the young lady realizes that since this guy has the necklace, that means Fel is going to become emperor. And if he returns to the capital, as he intended, then he will become one. Now the young lady understands that her name is included in the reason for the death of the emperor. Therefore, the girl thinks about who fate connected her with. At this moment, the knight returns. He apologizes for the delay and says that he did not find anything upstairs. The crown prince says that there is no need to apologize because everyone has already been found. The knight is a little shocked by this, and the main character offers to go down before it's too late. When they approach the village, the young lady thinks maybe she should change her place of residence, control herself, or go abroad. His Highness turns to her and tells her to better watch her step, but at the same moment the main character trips over a stone. Then the young man screams for her to be careful and grabs her hand, but his body is immediately pierced by pain from his wounds. The main character says that it would be better if he didn't grab her, and then asks if he is okay, but the prince only screams that she is making too much noise. The main character just smiles a little and sighs, and the guy, a little embarrassed, wonders if she decided to laugh at him, but the young lady just thanks him. After which the guy turns around. Ashana wonders if he was sulking, and then you say that one way or another, since they successfully found the necklace, now the guy will be able to leave there earlier. The prince screams, which means earlier, and the young lady just looks away and asks why he is so surprised, because His Highness is recovering very quickly, so in 3 or 4 days they will be able to leave. The guy just asks the main character if it's difficult for her to call him by name. And Ashana only says, how can she afford such audacity to address such a noble person by name? The girl thinks that in 3 or 4 days they will reach the capital instantly through the warp gate, But in this case, there's a danger of being caught by the aristocrats, so they will probably go through the village. Seeing so many different settlements on their way, they will quickly forget their small village. The young lady hopes that this will be the case, but when she approaches the house, she sees several women. The knight says that it seems like these lovely ladies have arrived today, and the young lady replies that now this is already commonplace here. The main character sees that even Grandma Carol has come, and she has health problems. But suddenly, the girl realizes something terrible. The prince asks what's wrong because she stopped so suddenly. But the main character only asks if they could leave even earlier. The brunette doesn't understand why she says this. Well, the main character looks at her relatives and sees that they will die in 4 years due to beheading. The girl remembers exactly that before the trip to the mountains, there were no changes in the destinies of her parents. But the young lady does not understand what happened and how this is even possible. The young lady thinks if it could be because of the chase, and if it could be because Fell's pursuers will attack the village. But what if it's not about them? The brunette turns around and asks what the problem is, because the girl is very pale. The main character just looks at him in horror. She asks if the guy said that they would leave in 3 or 4 days. After which she grabs his wrist and says that if you think about it, it's somehow too strange to be why everything changed immediately after he found the necklace. His Highness only asks what happened to the girl, and she says that when he was declassified, the reaction was also strange, because he said that one should not leave traces. And maybe now, when he found what he wanted, he immediately changed his mind and wants to finish everyone off to cover his tracks. The guy asks what she's even saying, but the main character only squeezes his wrist harder. The brunette asks Ash what happened and says that it hurts him to ask to let go, and the knight asks Milady to calm down. The main character screams that she is not their lady, and then says that in his condition, it will be difficult to do everything himself, and that means the guy is going to order his knights to carry out his plan, or he will entrust it to the most devoted of all. The young lady glares at the prince and wonders if this was all just a game. The way he was friendly with the villagers, and how awkwardly he tried to ask her for a favor, just so he could carry out his plan without any problems. The young lady is shaking all over and asks why. The knight wants to help his highness, but he only waves his hand so that he does not do anything. After which, Fell tells Ash to take a deep breath because everything is fine, and then tells Ash to exhale slowly and let go of his hand. The main character does so, and the prince then asks if she feels better. But the main character only asks why he calls her Ash, because she said that her name is Ashana S. The prince only asks if this is the only thing that worries her at the moment. The girl just looks at him seriously, and the young man wonders if she really behaves this way just because of her name. The guy claims that everyone in the village calls her that, so it suddenly occurred to him, and then asks if she was angry only because he called her by an incomplete name, and the girl says that she didn't allow him to call herself that. The prince screams that he didn't give her permission either, and the main character says that he doesn't want to say his name. That's why she calls him Phelim, and not because they are close, because this does not require his consent. The prince doesn't even know how to respond to this, and the girl apologizes for what happened. The brunette asks Ash why she even started behaving like that, but the girl understands that he called her Ash again and says that it's all difficult to explain. The knight understands the situation and says that he will go away for a minute and they can talk calmly. The main character says that this is not necessary, but the prince interrupts her and asks why she behaved this way. The girl claims that in simple terms, she can sense danger. The prince asks what this means, and the young lady replies that if something threatens a person's life, then she feels it. The guy remembers that he rarely saw such people among churchmen, which means the girl feels that in 3 or 4 days something is going to happen. The main character says that this is so it will be better if they leave as soon as possible. Now Ashana understands that if Fell had such an intention from the very beginning, whose predictions would also change immediately. The young man then asks if the girl, Ash, is the bringer of good luck, and the young lady asks if he has heard about it. The guy claims that many people say this, that he doesn't think that he will lose anything if he listens to Ash brings good luck. After which he says that he will listen to her words, and as soon as his condition improves, he will immediately leave no later than 3 days later. The young man asks if she is satisfied with this outcome. The main character says that this is what is needed, but she herself thinks that if everything goes like this, there is no need to worry. But suddenly, the light from the pendant falls into her eyes, and the girl tells His Highness about this. The next day, early in the morning, she knocks on his room, but he never answers. Then the main character simply opens the door. The prince asks what kind of person she is, and the young lady replies that he simply didn't respond, but the young man screams out that if no one responds, then you can't enter. The girl looks at the bed and sees bandages there, as well as medicines. So she sighs heavily. As Shauna asks if he has any problems with his back, and then says to give her the bandages and ointment, because in any case, he won't be able to reach it himself, and what's the point of being stubborn? The guy turns around and says that he's not stubborn, he just can handle it on his own. When the main character begins to bandage him, she thinks that tomorrow, Fel and the Knights will leave. After all these procedures, the young lady asks what he wants for breakfast, but the prince says that he doesn't care and doesn't need to bother too much, after which he thanks for the help. The young lady thinks that even though they had not been together for such a long time, she had a feeling that the guy is better than she thought. She understands that he usually behaves very arrogantly, but despite the chaotic first impression, his character seems to be good. After all, he knows how to sincerely thank and makes concessions when the matter does not tolerate compromise, and also does not demand that all amenities be provided to him free of charge. Rather, thanks to Fel and the Knights, their lives have become much easier because they help with cleaning, working in the garden, and chopping wood. The main character thinks that she would stay for a little while longer, but when she looks at her mother and her friends, she thinks that this should not be allowed under any circumstances. And for the sake of the villagers, it is necessary to send them out of there as soon as possible. The girl sighs and thinks that all that remains is to finish this, but suddenly someone turns to her. It turns out to be the prince. He is holding a bunch of grass in his hands and asks what it is and whether it can be eaten. And the young lady replies that it is poisonous, and if he continues to touch it with his hands, they will swell. Then the guy immediately throws her on the floor and screams that this should be warned in advance, and the young lady says that you just shouldn't touch everything. After that, they sit down at the table, and the guy asks what Ash actually does in life, and the girl says that His Highness is now just like a landlord, and says that she doesn't have much to answer because she cleans and helps her parents. Then the young man asks how she has fun, and the main character asks what it means to have fun. After which, the prince asks if she has any free time. Ashana says she doesn't even know, and adds that she sometimes goes to the library. The prince thinks that in this village, apparently, there are no even his peers, so he understands. The guy asks if she went to the academy and from which academy she graduated, but the young lady just looks at him blankly and remains silent. Then the young man asks Ash what's wrong, but the main character only asks if it amuses him to repeat her name like that, because it's already getting on her nerves, but the prince only says with a smile on his face that this is exactly so. After all, the girl got mad when he called her by an incomplete name and almost hurt him, so he will call her that until he fully recovers from what happened. The main character says that it would be better for him to take medicine, but His Highness just continues to call the girl by name. He says that it sounds so good, and this makes the young lady a little embarrassed and turns around. And then she says that it's too early for them to leave tomorrow, and she hopes that by then he will have recovered from his psychological trauma. A little while later, Ash's mom turns to Ash and says that they seem to get along very well with that young man. The main character asks with whom, but then she says that of course with their guest, who is in the room next to her. The young lady thinks that he mocks her too often to be able to say that they get along well, but Mom just hands Ash cookies and says that she baked something delicious, so please let her daughter take it to the Knights on the street. After all, they chopped so much firewood that there will be enough until next winter, so let Ash treat them, because these are her favorite macaroons. The main character, with a plate in her hands, cries out whether her beloved mother prepared cookies just for them, but she asks what her daughter is saying, and of course she baked it for them all to eat together. After which, the young lady goes to the Knights. They are still working, but when they see the young lady, they greet her. As Shauna says, Mommy has prepared cookies for them, so they should eat and rest. After this, the Knights immediately begin their meal. The main character thinks that she will miss this stung atmosphere, but then she hears the prince screaming. He asks Ash when she will bring him cookies. The girl thinks if only he wasn't there. She heads towards the guy with a plate of cookies and says that she's on her way, but when she looks up, the plate of cookies immediately flies out of her hands. The brunette is shocked by this. He does not understand what happened, and the mother screams whether the girl was hurt. The main character looks in shock and asks why. She sees that the date of her mother's death has changed to today. Ashana is still in a stupor, and her mother says that she will remove everything first so that no one gets hurt. Let Adolf stand still for now. His Highness approaches the girl and asks what it is and if she cut herself. He says that there are fragments everywhere, and it's lucky that the girl is wearing boots, but the main character doesn't answer anything and just stands there. Then the prince turns her towards him and sees that she is trembling all over and seems to be suffocating. So he tells Ash to start breathing. He claims that they know what danger she felt, but if she doesn't breathe, the main character just grabs her head and says that she needs to run because they should be there soon. The young lady immediately falls off her feet after this. The prince grabs her and thinks that the girl, who doesn't even care about a sword presented to her throat, is trembling so much. His Highness tells Ash to raise her head and tell him exactly what needs to be done. The young lady, raising her head, tells him to take the knights and leave now because there is no time to explain. Ashana immediately bursts out of his arms and screams for him to leave now. Then the young man just says okay. He heads to the door and says that he will do as she asks. And in response, she must do as he asks and breathe calmly, after which he leaves. In the evening, the elderly ladies are talking, and one of them asks if they left, and the second asks if they were planning to do it tomorrow and why so urgently. As Shauna hears all this, one of the ladies says that it is a pity that she did not give them her freshly baked bread, but it seems that they were in a hurry. The main character asks for a moment of attention, and everyone in the room immediately looks at her. The young lady claims that she understands that they are all very sad that the knights left, but she called them because of one more important problem. After all, today people who pose a threat will arrive in the village. She doesn't know exactly who it will be, but if the villagers are suddenly threatened, then let them be sure to say that they don't know anything. After which she once again tells them that they must do so. One of the women comes up to Ashana and says, okay, although she doesn't understand what should happen, but do as she said. She also says that if Ash thinks so, then something will definitely happen. The young lady understands that she usually doesn't like it, but sometimes there is still a benefit from the lucky Ash. After this, evening came. The young lady realizes that she warned the villagers and removed all possible traces. She looks out the window and thinks that she did everything in her power, but she just can't forget Fel. The girl thinks that by now they should already be in the village of Fabiz, and they need to get to the place she told about. Ashana realizes that it is not his fault. She may not have stopped suspecting him until the very end, but now she is sure, because the predictions changed even before they left. And that means there is only one option left. At this time, one man is riding a horse. When he is observed towards the village, he says that at first glance there are no more than 20 houses there. Well, he thinks that the fewer people you need to finish off, the better, because this is also a kind of work. Then the man tells his knights to drag all the people there, after which the knights immediately break into the houses of the residents, and then they forcefully drag them out into the street. They scream so that they don't resist, and go out if they don't want them to use force. The main character hears all this, and her mother suddenly turns to her. But the girl says not to worry, because if they do as they say, then there will be no problems. After which the doors open into their room, and Ash and his mother see the knights. They scream for them to kneel next to the others. The residents are all shaking in fear, and the man asks if they have brought everyone without exception. And then they notice that there are almost only old people there and tells them to listen carefully. After which he claims that he hates wasting energy on useless things. So let me answer the questions posed honestly, and then asks if the prince has ever been to this village. The main character looks at him, but when he pays attention to her, the girl immediately bows down. She says, why would such a noble person visit such a small remote village, because there's nothing even to see there? But the man says his tracks led them in this direction. The girl just asks what traces he is talking about, but the stranger only points his sword at her, but the young lady looks at him in surprise. The girl says that there are many animals in the mountains. Then the stranger sticks a dagger into the ground and says that she is not the timid type, and then asks where her house is. But the girl replies that it is right next to the mountain, after which he says that, judging by the way she calmly answers, all traces have long been erased, but the main character says that there were no traces. The man just smiles, and then stands up, and the knights grab one woman from the village. She immediately screams. One of the residents screams what they are doing and says to take his hands off his wife right now. The main character screams because they caught Aunt Charlie. She immediately asks the stranger why he is doing this, because she told them that they did not see anyone and no one appeared there. But the stranger just laughs, and then grabs Ashanu by the hair. He pulls her towards his face. And she asks if she thought that he would answer something like, oh, like that, and leave, because these village people are so stupid and naive. After which he throws the girl back. Her parents immediately run up to the young lady and ask if she is okay. The stranger only says that they are her parents and orders the knights to drag them there. They immediately grab the main character's mother, and the young lady thinks how this can happen and why the reasons for her death have not yet changed. The girl thinks that if this is their fate, they will all be mercilessly killed. The stranger just points the blade in her direction and asks if she has decided to answer where the prince is. But the girl only tells him the date of October 1st, 422. The stranger just asks what this means, and the main character says that this is the day when a knife will be stabbed in his heart, and the person next to him will die from a fall from a height on the 28th of September. The man behind him will die from the same reason on the 26th of September. The young lady asks if they really don't know how to go to the mountains. The knights do not understand what she is talking about, and Ashana only adds that this is very pleasing because all of them will not live long. One of the knights screams that this girl has gone crazy and is talking some nonsense, so she just needs to be finished off. But when the knight runs to the main character, he immediately sees that the date changes to September 24th. The young lady is shocked to realize that fate has changed, and the knight immediately falls to the ground. The one who finished him off was Fell. The guy with a smile on his face says that he came to make sure that the girl was breathing as expected. Herodian orders to protect the inhabitants first, and the young lady does not understand why Fell is there. Well, more importantly, she does not understand what happened in general, because the red prediction changed color, and this has never happened before. The young lady understands that the inscription changes if a person is killed before his time has come, but the black inscription appeared even before his death. Then what was it all about? But the young lady is pulled out of her thoughts by His Highness. She asks what he is doing, but he only says that her eyes were red, so he asks if she was crying, after which he asks if he was mistaken, but then says that something is obviously wrong with the girl. The young lady just tells him to listen and asks if he can let her go. Then the guy immediately becomes a little embarrassed and apologizes. Let go of her cheeks. But then he thinks, why is he suddenly so confused, and maybe it's just a trick of the light at sunset. After all, for a minute it seemed to him that Ash was crying, and this gave him a strange feeling. But he immediately drives these thoughts away from himself and thinks about what he is talking about, after which he screams so that the main character would better say whether this is all her reaction to the fact that he saved her. The young lady immediately bows and says thank you very much for saving them, and Fell asks if that's all. The main character thinks that if he had not helped, and the predictions of these people had remained the same, then the knights would really have killed off all the inhabitants of the village. Ashana understands that when swords were presented to her parents' throats, deep in her soul, she felt something that is difficult to describe. It was rage and emptiness, such a bright and unpleasant feeling that you wanted to tear and throw. The girl thinks what it was. After all this, His Highness is informed that everything is almost ready, but while they were saving the residents, about 3 knights managed to escape. The brunette says to leave them because the 3 of them won't do anything. Therefore, let the knights first check the current state of the residents. The main character looks at the prince. She says that if you think about how it all came to this. She says that they only recently left and asks why they came back again. And weren't they going to the village of Habis? She also asks if they really didn't find the way. The prince gets a little angry and asks if she thinks he's a complete fool. The guy claims that everything is correct, and he was going to Habis as she advised to make a copy of his necklace. The shop owner examined the necklace and said that it was immediately clear from its appearance that it was a precious thing, so the work would take about a week. The man asks if this will work. The prince says that time does not matter, and the main thing is that they do it well. Then the young man leaves and says that he will see him in a week. Herodian immediately meets him and asks if he has finished his business. His Highness says yes, and then the knight suggests looking for an overnight stay nearby. The guy remembers how he spoke with Ash then. The girl said that you still can't see what's inside the medallion, which means, apart from the true heir to the throne, no one will be able to understand whether it is a fake or an original. Therefore, a young man can make a copy of the real one and hide it together, which no one will know about, but let him wear a fake around his neck because it will be safer. The main character, noticing herself and his surprised look, asks if she said something strange. The young man immediately says that no, and claims that this is a great idea, because the medallion is so valuable to him that he could not even think about creating a fake, but his pursuers will not guess either. Now the young man remembers how the girl told him that when he leaves Diente, he should immediately go to the artisan from the village of Habis, because she knows him and therefore can vouch for his skill. His Highness thinks about it. He understands that Ashana Az is not an ordinary girl. After all, a dagger was put to her throat and she was threatened, But this special girl always remains calm. Although a little time had passed, he had fun with her. Well, sometimes when he was around, the young lady's reaction was a little strange. Fel thinks why this is and what frightened her so much. Well, then realization comes to him, and the guy immediately turns to Herdian. And then he claims that they are returning to Dianta. Now the main character approaches His Highness and asks if he made a copy of the necklace since he was heading to Fabi's. The guy says that he went where the girl recommended and left the order. Then the young lady asks why he came back at all. Well, he doesn't want to say that he returned because he was worried, so he doesn't know what to answer. And then he says that he came back to check if she was breathing. The girl asks what kind of person this is, but the prince only pokes at her and screams what kind of person she is, because she knew about such a danger, but did not tell him anything. The young lady says that he was wounded, and the young man replies that his body is quickly recovering because all princes were born with the blessing of God. It would take an ordinary person 2 months to recover from such injuries as his, but after 2 days, he can move normally. And in a month, he would be completely healed if the girl told him everything right away. The main character interrupts him and says that although he is able to move, he is not yet fully healed. And besides, it is he who is being persecuted, so she made the most reasonable, in her opinion, decision. The guy thinks that even though his condition leaves much to be desired, but even feeling all the danger, was she really going to confront those people alone? His Highness says that it's still her. But when the guy sees the young lady's face, he becomes silent and asks what's wrong again. The main character says that as he just said, his knights managed to escape. The brunette says that it's okay, and he can deal with them alone, so she shouldn't worry. But the main character asks what if they have accomplices, because they will always follow on his heels. And what will happen if their village is in danger again, because he is not going to stay there forever. The prince looks at her and understands that this girl, even in such a situation, only worries about the village and close people. He sees that all her hair is disheveled, her clothes are dirty, so he understands that she was clearly mocked a lot before his arrival. The guy sighs and puts his hand on her head. He says, "I don't need to worry, because this bastard is the 3rd prince. It's not his style to use such methods of threats." His Highness looks at the sky and realizes that this bastard is doing the opposite. At this time, the guy with blue hair is in his room. He is holding a bird in his hands, but suddenly he hears a scream from the corridor. Someone screams that he has come to report on the task, so the young man, hearing this, says to let him in. This turns out to be the same man of mine who attacked the village. He screams that he has come to tell His Highness extremely important information. The prince releases the bird and asks what all this fuss is about. This is the 3rd prince of the Elier Empire, Esselin de Elier. He tells the man not to stain the carpet and to report standing at the door. The same one obeys His Highness and says that he will be amazed when he hears. After all, he found the 1st prince in the village of Dienta. A young man with blue hair asks if he brought him, and the guy replies that there were some difficulties with this, because the knights guarding the prince dealt with almost all of his subordinates, so he was unable to do anything. He claims that the 1st prince was apparently seriously injured, but thinks that he was given treatment almost immediately, so he led the detachment without any problems. The 3rd prince says that his brother received a lot of blessings, after which he asks if the guy left his people and ran away. The same one tries to justify himself and says that the 1st prince attacked them and he had no choice. Esselin looks at him, and he just says that he had to report to His Highness about the results of the search and asks what would be the benefit if he died. But the prince only asks what it means to attack. The man says that the tracks of the 1st prince led him to the village of Dienta, and while they were interrogating the villagers, the prince interrupts him. He says that this is very strange because the guy could not leave traces behind himself, and even if so, that's why his interlocutor was so sure that it was the prince. The man doesn't even know how to respond to this. And the young man with blue hair asks what else happened, and then says to report everything down to the smallest detail, every action. After the guy listened to the whole story, he asks if they resorted to threats. The man understands that as soon as one looks at the prince, it is already clear that he does not accept such methods, so he did not want to say anything, or the prince is not as soft-bodied as he thought. The guy claims that there was also some strange girl there. After all, when they were intimidating the residents, she suddenly began to talk some kind of nonsense that 2 knights would die on the 26th and 28th of September due to a fall from a height, and he should die today. The prince asks if she is a fortune teller, and the man replies that on the way there, these 2 knights really died in the fall, but this was just an accident, and besides, he got there alive. The prince says to tell him more about this girl. Then the subordinate begins to talk. He says that the girl's name is Ash, and she looks to be in her early 20s with red hair and scarlet eyes. The prince says that if she really predicts the future, then we can say that she sees death. The man says that it even sounds funny and tells His Highness that he knows how to joke well. The blue-haired young man only asks if he knows anything else, but he says that there was nothing special anymore. Then the prince says to his subordinate that he has done a good job and can now go and rest. The man thanks him and leaves, while the prince orders 2 of his subordinates to get rid of the guy, after which he dresses in his outfit and smiles, and then says that they are going to Diantha. The knights at this time calm down the villagers. One of them says that they dealt with all these nasty scoundrels, and one lady says that after his words, I finally felt better. She says how lucky it is that the knights were nearby, but they say that it is their fault, because of them they had to go through so much, but the lady says that everything is fine and asks maybe they will take her bread. They thank her for her care. The main character watches all this. She sighs easily and thinks that a week has passed with you. The residents' predictions have become the same, and although slowly, it seems that everyone is gradually moving away from what happened. The young lady enters the house and says that she is back, but is immediately greeted by her worried mother. She tells her daughter to rest for at least a minute. Ashana tries to say that she is fine, but her mother does not even listen to her and says that there is no need to pretend that she is fine. After all, she is worried about her daughter. The main character sighs and thinks that everything is really fine with her. Then she sits down at the table and thinks. The girl understands that if she were a normal person, she would have turned white with fear and obviously would have been shocked. But the girl thinks that it really didn't hurt her at all. She thinks that she needs to at least pretend. But suddenly, someone comes up behind her and calls her by name. It turns out to be His Highness. The guy says that even though she said that she had a balanced character, what happened should have shocked even her. He claims that he understands that she does not want to worry her parents, but there is no need to rub the whole pretend. Ashana looks at him and thinks that it's not like that at all, and then says that it really didn't affect her at all. But the guy says that she's back to her own way. The prince claims that of all the girls he has seen, she is the most unusual, but everyone sometimes needs to speak out, otherwise it will be very difficult. The young lady looks at him and then says that he is right, and she tried to open it, but because of the horror she experienced, she can't even eat. It's so hard for her. His Highness begins to worry about this, and the young lady continues her speech. Ashana says that she has such a fragile mental structure that such cases seem to just be carried by me. To be honest, even now she is almost crying from fear. Fel tells Ash to better read her books. He points to his hand and tells her to look at how goosebumps have popped up on it. The young lady wonders if he saw through her right away. His Highness just puts his hand on the young lady's head and says that she is sure that everything is in order, then he will not say anything more, and from now on, he will not create problems. Therefore, the young lady need not worry, but the girl only asks if they happen to have a dog in their palaces. The guy doesn't understand what she's talking about and claims that she doesn't. Ashana points to his hand and says that lately he very often puts his hand on her head with such ease. The young man blushes at such words and immediately removes his hand. He screams that Ash misunderstood everything and he doesn't put that kind of meaning into it, and also that this is an involuntary gesture, but the young lady just laughs at it. Then the guy blushes even more and is surprised. The main character, the redhead, continues to laugh and asks why he was so embarrassed. She says that His Highness was literally flushed. The young man cries out that he only wanted to console her. The main character clears her throat and says that one way or another, she is glad that nothing happened over the past week. But to be honest, she's still a little worried. The prince says that, as he said earlier, I need to worry because that bastard doesn't like such methods of threats. Then the young lady asks what methods he likes. The brunette says that may sound strange. But the third prince loves to conduct conversations in a noble manner, and during the conversation, he finishes off his opponents while watching the spray fly away. The guy is still such a sick bastard that the attack that took place is clearly not his style. And even if he is behind this, he will not do the same thing twice, so nothing threatens this village anymore. The young lady thinks about it a little, and the prince adds that, of course, if he continues to stay there, he does not know how things will turn out. So he says that he is thinking of leaving tomorrow morning. The girl looks at him and says that if you think about it, he was already delayed for a week, so she asks if this is very harmful to his plans. But the prince claims that it's okay, because he said that it would take just a week to make the necklace, and the main character now understands why he decided to stay longer. The young man just sighs and says that it seems that gradually all the residents in the village are returning to normal, so now is just the time to leave. The main character says that indeed, they will leave tomorrow. The brunette adds that at the same time he also dispelled all her worries so that the girl can be grateful, but the young lady only tells him to pack his things, and she can send them now. The next day, the knights say goodbye to the villagers, who are asked if they are actually leaving this time. One of the knights says that they are already in debt to them, but the residents only say that it's not at all, and they can stay and stay, and besides, it's going to get colder soon. One of the residents says he heard that they need to return home and continue the family business. They surround the knights, and another resident says that of course, he is clearly from a noble family, believe me. His family sent him to travel around the country for the purpose of self-education, and the guy's parents are now clearly worried. The prince thinks how long they have been making up his origin, and for some reason everyone has different theories. But then the main character approaches him and holds out a bag in his hand. The guy asks what it is. All the young lady claims is that her mom baked cookies so he can eat them when he gets hungry. After that, they say that they really will probably leave. Residents wish them a safe journey and say that if they pass by one day, they should stop by and see them. They also tell Ash it's not too late to come back. The main character says she will do so, but then the realization of what was said comes to her. Mom says that she thought it would be good if she accompanied the knights to the village of Fabes, and the young lady asks why. But the woman interrupts her and says that she is so shy and reminds her of someone. The main character's mother says that she completely understands her, but she may no longer worry about them, and at the same time they will get divorced. So she tells her daughter to take her time and return home carefully. Ashana thinks that the villagers are looking too kindly and says that they misunderstood something, but they don't listen to her or tell her to be careful. Then the young lady agrees and says that she will go. When they are already on the road, the prince says how touching it is, because the good-natured Ash agreed to accompany them. The young lady remembers the words of the residents that she has a kind heart and how they praise her. The prince asks why she has such an expression on her face, or maybe this is the kind of face that the kind and caring Ash usually has. Ashana just turns to him and angrily asks if he likes something, and His Highness says that their kind and attentive Ash may not know something. Then the girl screams angrily, and His Highness just laughs at the top of his lungs. He wipes away tears of laughter and said that he had already asked several times to tell her in more detail about her abilities, because then, if something happened, then maybe he could help somehow. The young lady remembers how he approached her and asked if she had told the villagers about her premonitions. The girl said yes. Then the prince asked whether it was the seer's abilities or just some kind of premonition, but the young lady just left silently. Now she says that in any case they will not meet again. Therefore, there will be no situation where she will need his help. The guy thinks about it. He says that since she doesn't want to talk, then there's no need.